have to put who I am. Who am I?
You're Kirsten.
Yeah.
Welcome, Kirsten. You might have to leave and then come back in if you want to rename yourself. You don't have to, but you would be the only person other than Evan who's not. Oh no! How did you do it?
She left.
There's an edit button. No,
Okay. Well, all right. No,
how'd I find it?
Good job.
Look at it. It looks like a Brady Bunch setup we got going here because we're not looking at Evan's artwork. Candor's come in. Who you have to change your name, by the way. You are not Candor today. No, is
yeah,
he?
He
is Candor today.
You're always Candor, brother. Don't worry.
Looking good. I love that you.
My other character.
I love that Candor and Pendelv sound like similar, and they also hate each other. So it's like this competitive edge of just who's speaking the word better.
I thought about that.
Awesome. If there's any background, I might mute some of y'all. So just a heads up to come off mute before you speak. But let's go ahead and kick it off. If you're joining us, welcome. This is going to be our second continuous reading of Behind the Shroud. For the OG people, you have probably listened to us 4 times now, but now we're going to be going in order. So as you come in, feel free to say hello in the comments. Let us know where you're at. If you're watching the replay, you can do the same thing. But Matt had a really good idea for these next couple of weeks. We just read you the book that he created. Behind the Shroud. Matt, do you have a copy on you by chance?
Yeah, it's within reach. Here we go.
Oh, I beat you to it. Behind the Shroud, this beautiful work of art from Matt.
The work of art.
That was funny.
Team effort. Evan, credit where credit's due.
For those, Evan is here. Evan, how you doing today, man?
Yeah.
He's back, dude. Saul will like this. Katie will like this. We were doing an ongoing temperature check of how Evan was every week when we all got together. And we're like, Evan, how you doing? And it's always like, or. And it was like 4 weeks in a row. And then we got to a fine. I'm like, Evan, how are you? He goes, fine. And I'm like, whoa, holy shit. And then this week, I'm like, Evan, how are you? He goes, all right, how are you? And that's like an 8.8 to 9 out of 10 from Evan. So happy to have you here.
That is really high on the Evan scale. I'm glad you're doing better, buddy.
We all think about you. We all care about you. So as we speak from chapters 4 through 8 today, Evan will be working on a piece of art from an upcoming children's book that we got going out for Adventures of Beck and Keith. For those that have not got a copy yet, you can now go to our website and pick up paperbacks and hardcovers of Adventures of Beck and Keith. These books are based off of my son and my friend's son. We have just Bastoonified them. And we are now working with our following to Bastoonify their kids for characters that Beck and Keith can meet along their journey. The next book, they will meet a kid called Luca the Lightseer. And he is going to teach a good lesson about shining light in the darkest of places. Evan will be working on the cover of that book today. So between chapters, we're going to be checking in on Evan, seeing how everything's going. Yeah, that's everything on the children's book side. Am I missing anything there, Evan?
Wish me luck.
As always, we make his job harder and harder and harder. He is now writing what someone's kid looks like and then showing it off to that father and mother. Nothing harder. While he does that, Matt, myself, Katie, Kurt, Kirsten, and Nikki, and one more, hopefully we're going to get Fee. I will reach out to him one more time. We'll be speaking in our parts in Behind the Shroud. If you're wondering, who are they speaking? They're right below us. I will be Joran the Jester. Matt will be Pendelv. Katie will be Saw. Evan will be a character called Art. And Kurt will be Candor. Kirsten will be Hikari. And Nikki will be Botan. And if we don't get Fee here, Matt will come in and be Daisuke.
If I have to.
So, Matt, do you want to do just a light summary? If you're
Sure.
with us, grab your book. A light summary of chapters 1 through 3 before we dive in.
All right, here's the back of the book description. Pendelv the Parser is on the case. As winter thaws into spring, something sinister keeps the sleepy town of Lucidus in chills. 10 lives have been claimed by a mysterious killer, and whispers point to a figure once adored, an eccentric jester rumored to have retreated into madness. Summoned to investigate is Pendel the Parser, a detective with 3 beasts and a sharp mind. As he unravels the puzzle, he finds more than he bargained for. An old feud reignited, a shadowy foe lurking in the fog-drenched riverlands, and a deadly game where every move might be his last. In the midst of peril, an unlikely bond begins, offering a dark insight and perhaps a key to the killer's next move. Last week, we read chapters 1 through 3. In simply put, the detective arrives on the scene. The 10 murders have happened. They've shaken this city called Lucidus to its last wit. Before Pendel can even really get settled in his camp, he witnesses this strange act of vandalism through the eyes of one of his callings. Happens to be this one, named Luke. Then we meet the vandal, the man once adored, the eccentric jester rumored to have retreated into madness. There he is. And he seems to have a deeper knowledge of the murderers than any fully innocent man should have. Something's going on there. So that's where we pick up. We're jumping into chapters 4 through 8 today, which is going to be taking a peek 4 weeks ago into maybe why this Jordan the Jester has the insights that he has about the killer. And then we will jump forward all the way to chapters led by Saw, the beacon of order. It's kind of like the police chief. And they think Saw, and Candor, they think they have enough evidence to make an arrest. And so we'll see them deciding, hey, we got to go get this guy. Let's go pick him up. We know where he is. At least we know where he was last seen. So,
yeah. Love it.
Enough.
By the way, Rhodes is listening. He would like a part in the next book. Start thinking of what his name can be, Bella. I think it is like one last thing we'll say from chapter 3. Oh, that's going to have to get muted quick. From chapter 3, we kind of hear Joran talk about these Shroud Hounds, and we're going back in time, like you say, 4 weeks, where this first begins of Joran like understanding this. That's correct, right, Matt? You're muted because you're slurping. Oh my God. It's one of that and chewing with your mouth open is just up there.
My beverage is done. So
I could tell. We all could tell.
I forgot your question.
All right. Screw it. We're diving in. Joran knows of these Shroud Hounds. We're going back in time 4 weeks prior to where this started with him. I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to be narrating and speaking my parts. We're not going to get fee here. So, Matt, are you cool with playing Dice K?
Yeah, sure.
Dice K,
Don't cancel me.
An old friend of, you're just going to be, say it as Matt, maybe, an old friend of Joran. And yeah, we'll go in. Heads up before we go in. One, if you have questions as we go through this, you're like, oh, I'm reading along, what's going on? Feel free to put them in the comments and we'll answer them after chapters. Second thing, Matt is a jerk. So he's going to put in here words in here that are very hard to pronounce. I believe one of them is called funicular.
Yeah,
Funicular.
Funicular.
All right.
Funicular.
See, Evan knows.
Evan's muted now too. All right. Cool.
Funicular.
Funicular.
Yeah.
This sucks. Okay. We're diving in. And hold on, let me do a quick breath.
We're gonna show our faces, and so instead of pull up the script on the screen, you just get to listen. But for those of us that are reading, have a second screen somewhere with this pulled up. Is that possible for everybody?
I just dropped Hikari. I just dropped the link in the private chat, so you have it.
Cool. All right.
You're good to go, Kirsten, for your parts here. You're on mute. Just a heads up.
Yeah.
Awesome blossom.
Quick check. How's my audio, by the way?
It's amazing. It's amazing. Give us a real ask again, but as Candor.
How's my audio?
Oh, I love it.
Throw a boss in there.
How's my audio, boss?
Saw?
Candor's here for 2 reasons. To chew bubble gum and rain down the cold hand of justice. Looks like I'm already out of bubble gum.
All right. That made me feel better for doing my part. Thank you, Candor. All right. First Victims, Chapter 4, reading for the part of Joran. Here we go. Chapter 4, The First Victims. 4 weeks prior to the parser's arrival, winter relented. In the warm glow following the first hardy melt, Joran scoured the icy crevices for a special sort of resin. In the foothills of the Skade Range, constantly trickling water wore sheets of ice into fragile puzzles. Over winter, the heavy snowpack emulsified the autumn detritus and a dusty layer of carbon ash into a black goop called shilajit. Knew the places to jump. Adder knew the places to look. Venus knew the places to pry. Joran, he knew the places to dig. He shoved his blackened hands into the frosty muck, harvesting handfuls at a time. Can you imagine what I would be like without bones? The jester asked his beasts, chuckling. A string of gourds hung from his belt. He hollowed them out for the purpose of storing the stuff. He scraped both palms into his final gourd and took pains to ensure not a single clumpy dollop was missed. He cherished the resin. He needed every last scrap for the task at hand. With his stores full, he hastened towards a forgotten way station in the north face of Mount Cancratch, which is based off of Evan, by the way. The way station, just a 4-building block, used to be a town of sorts until industry steered mountain traffic toward the clear cuts and the amethyst mines. The advent of funicular railways and cable trams took people further west. The thoroughfares up and around the Skade Range were built to convey valuable resources, timber, workers, minerals, to the magnates who lived in edifice, which Joran had no need for. He busied himself with his own errand. He followed a curl of smoke to the way station. While forgotten by most, it had not been forgotten by all. Only one of the 4 buildings in the abandoned town was habitable, Dice K's Inn. 2 of the 4 were ramshackle and derelict, while the last had been converted into an outhouse. In recent days, Dice K repurposed his inn into an infirmary. As Joran reached the top of the long alpine staircase, he encountered the old, wizened innkeeper finishing his business in the outhouse. "You smell like you fell in, Suke," Joran greeted. The hunched-over man held himself up with a cane. He had a long, white beard trailing behind him in wisps. Joran gulped air from the trek up the stairs, but he pinched his nose and hid his mouth inside his shirt. "How's Hikari?" he said, his voice muffled by cloth.
She feels better after you leave,
Daisuke said, grumbling.
It must relieve her to see you go.
"I believe it," Joran said, flicking a glance down the winding flight of stairs. The giant insisted Adder and stay at the entrance to the town, to spare themselves the 100 steps that led from the main road to the scenic inn, and for them to keep their distance from Daisuke and his wife, Hikari. Venus rode on his back, with its tail looped around his neck like a scarf. "She's doing well, then?" The innkeeper grunted, an affirmative noise.
I have a new arrival.
Daisuke said. "A guest, or...?"
A patient. A man on the road.
"Are you keeping him away from Hikari?"
Hikari is feeling better. She insists on helping.
"How are you?" Joran asked. "I mean it when I say you smell worse than dead things under logs. You smell worse than Shilajit. You sicken me. with your aroma. How about a bath? No jest, said the jester. Daisuke grumbled. You want to grumble? Where is she? Joran asked, letting the issue go. The grayed innkeeper pointed toward the inn with his cane. Wearily, Daisuke followed Joran inside, out of the corner of his eye, so that not to alert the innkeeper of his suspicion, the jester watched him. Did he always look so weak? Inside, the kettle sat on the hearth, bubbling better smells. Joran went to sit by it, to clear his nostrils and to warm his back. He situated his massive form off to the side of the fireplace so as to avoid blocking heat for the others, namely Daisuke, Hikari, and their new guest, who laid sound asleep on the cot in the corner of the tap room. Hikari felt better. In fact, she appeared to have made a full recovery. Joran thought she would, since the thing had left her to jump to him before moving on to Adder. Such was the true reason he insisted Adder keep its distance. It still clung to his calling, and he would sooner let the beast endure its effects than the frail woman. His totem was bearing it well enough for the time being. Besides, he wished to avoid alarming his old friends with talks of invisible parasites that lived in a gray realm beyond their detection, and hoped beyond hope that whatever it was, some form of shadow Azigra, did not roam in droves. Whatever it was, he prayed it was an isolated incident, a singular occurrence. Yet somehow he doubted that prayer would be answered. After food and lighthearted conversation, Hikari appeared amenable to more serious subjects. Joran cocked his head toward the sleeping man before repeating for a third time. Daisuke called him a patient.
He's not sick. He's beastless.
You found him on the road? Daisuke nodded and then quietly added,
Wandering, sure to freeze if I left him to it.
A chill ran down Joran's fireside spine. In sync, Venus shivered, whined, and pulled itself closer to the jester's face. It's okay, he reassured his totem. I won't let anything happen to you. Can you be sure they aren't just separated? Hikari shrugged.
Suki found him on the road, looking more tired than manic. You know how one gets when they're separated from their totem. It was not like that.
As if on cue, Hikari's gerbil beast, named Ginny, riding on Daisuke's yak beast, Tibet, ambled into the tap room. When Joran looked into Tibet's unfocused eyes, he recognized a pain it shared with Adder. Upon reflection, Hikari possessed the same glossy gaze before the parasite left her. The jester learned to always trust his instincts, especially when it came to people and callings. Daisuke did look weaker, not because he had acquired a parasite, but because his beast had. Again, Joran steeled his face before steering his gaze toward his friends. No more guests or patients once this one recovers. Please.
If we did not take patience, we would not have guests,
Hikari said. Joran swallowed, carefully choosing his words. There is something going around, he said. A sickness, he lied. One you yourself, as you have seen, are susceptible to.
It is not so bad,
Hikari assured him. It is so bad, Joran answered. Without asking, he dished himself up another bowl of stew. Before he left, he would eat as much as he could, knowing what he was about to do and how much it would take out of him and his beasts.
I recovered.
Hikari argued. You got lucky, Joran said, beginning to realize the flaws in withholding the truth. Unless he made clear the severity of the predicament, they would never be convinced to stop taking in sick travelers. Though, even if he did tell them, it still might not make any difference. One did not change a woman like Hikari's heart with cautionary tales. Unless the day she died, even if it killed her, until the day she died, even if it killed her, she would lend a helping hand. A better strategy would be figuring out how to stop these parasites by learning their weaknesses. Then he could do more than simply scare them over a new fearful foe. Then he could empower them to do what came most naturally: heal.
It's not luck. I'm strong.
You are. This will make you stronger, Joran said, handing each of them a gourd of Shilajit. They kept 3 for him. He kept 3 for himself on account of being at least 3 times larger than his diminutive friends. Yeah. The remaining gourds he placed on the table to be rendered into strong medicine for the sleeping man and future patients. Hikari clapped her hands with pleasure.
You found some. This this is good for your brain. Oh, you need it, Joran. And it's good. It prevents bone loss.
About that, Joran said confusedly. How does one lose their bones?
The same way you lost your marbles.
Daisuke joked. As Joran fingered a bitter dollop into his mouth, he frowned. Neither of you make a lick of sense. When finally Joran left, it was with a full belly. He sent Venus away without saying goodbye, but made up for it by doubling his own decorum. On his way out, he gave them all gigantic hugs. He started with Hikari, then Ginny, then Daisuke, and finally, with some reservations, but knowing what he had to do, he brought Tibet under arm. As he did, he thought about the beastless patient. He considered all the laughter created by jokes Hikari and Daisuke made at his expense over the years. He considered how much he loved them and how dear he considered their friendship. He pretended to wrestle the yak totem as he often did, but this time it was not for sport. He did so with attuned senses, waiting for the precise moment the parasite left the beast and jumped to him. When it did, without a further word of goodbye, the jester hastened out the door. Whew, that was
Great
long.
job, Hikari.
There.
That was a long one.
That was a really long one. Good job, Hikari. I didn't even know you came off video. Good to see you. That was
Hello.
That was very
There
good.
she is. The
Very
old frail innkeeper.
Matt, I know you're in there
Awesome.
as Daisuke, but anything you want to say to this chapter to kind of tie a bow on it?
Yeah, I think the purpose that this chapter serves is to humanize Joran. I mean, he's such like a recluse. He's out there in the wild. Someone that's very easy to judge. I think in one of the upcoming chapters, it's like the last sighting we had of Joran was him riding one of his beasts in the sky, juggling, and continued to juggle even after he dropped all his balls. It's just like he's a weirdo. And so now we see him with these 2 people that are just, out here kind of isolated as well, but they're like really close friends. I feel like it gives me the impression that Joran is going around this whole region making all kinds of friends with sort of the isolated people wherever they are.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Sometimes it's so hard for reading comprehension as you're reading. This is in the past, Joran getting this medicine called Shilajit, going to this town, meeting Daisuke, an old friend of his, and Hikari, and then you're realizing that Joran is basically taking these Shroud Hounds off of these people and callings and transferring them to himself. So you kind of see this selfless guy here. He can't be the guy that commits the murders, can he?
I don't know.
Or is he? No, just kidding.
Hikari, that was amazing. Is Hikari still in this?
Oh yeah. Oh
Okay,
wait,
cool.
no. That's her last bit.
I'm gonna tell you the same thing I told Saw last week. If you want to leave, you can. If you'd like to stay and hang with us, you totally can as well. We'd love
It's
to
5 a.m. where she is, so
so
I imagine that. And and same with Watanabe.
All right. So,
I'm actually fine. Like I want to like stay, and I just want to say that you made it so fun and easy to lead after you. And I'm like, like I'm feeling like, this is my death now. At least I got to meet an old friend and argue with him. So yeah, like the banters.
Thank you for all your jokes, Hikari. No, it was super fun to go back and forth with you. That was fun banter. Without further ado, do we go to chapter 5 now, Matt?
Let's do it.
We'll do chapter 5. We'll do a small little summary, and then we'll check in on Evan as like an intermission to see how the
cool. Actually, maybe let's do 5 and 6. You're gonna have to mute that. So we can go straight from 5. As soon as 5's done, then if Botan wants to pick up, these are pretty short chapters.
I hope so, man. Sometimes when you're in a long chapter, I'm like, is anyone listening to me?
Yes, we're at the edge of our seat.
No, you're not. All right.
I'm standing, but yeah.
Chapter 5, Experiments. 1 week later, Joran had tried everything he could think of to destroy the parasites, to no avail. The Shilajit bought him extra days of lucidity, but it was more medicine than cure. He and his calling spent day after clear day experimenting. Every waking moment they devoted themselves to trying something new. Their most notable success occurred by pushing a spear through a hagstone and wielding it shroud side. Yet the matter of the shroud hounds' bodies did not pierce and fatally bleed. The prod irritated them. It caused one to jump from Adder to Venus and back, but just dispelling the hound would not do. Joran had to identify their weakness and kill them. If the hounds merely left them in search of other victims, nothing would be gained and life would be lost. The previous summer, when Adder first affixed his eye stones and peered into the gray shroud for the first time, it terrified the jester. It still did, more so for revealing it quartered black shadow. It still did, more so for revealing it quartered black shadow Azigra with light-sucking white voids for eyes and oozy, dripping siphons for mouths. Much worse, after discovering they slowly consumed one's desire to live. Slowly, at least in Joran's case. Hikari, a woman in her 60s, had been reduced to catatania in a day and 2 nights. Despite his terror, by the end of the 7th day of failure, Joran found himself at his wit's end. If he knew of a hagstone large enough to fit through, he was ready to heave caution to the wind. He would have slipped into the shroud with a fight in his heart and sought the relief of death, either his or the hound's. On the 8th day, the jester could barely open his eyes. He walked in a state of aimless delusion, clinging to life, but barely. His callings reflected his malaise. His callings reflected his malaise. Adder, most of all, for having to endure its own hound on top of the effects of a diminished person. He tried his best to think. Out of ideas he was. Collapsed he did. Failure he accepted. Death he welcomed. Scene. Is it malaise?
It is malaise.
God dang it. All right, that's the end of chapter 5, and I'm done being a narrator. Go over to Matt so you can set up chapter 6.
Great job.
Okay.
Thank you, Hikari.
We can do this. Someone that's not me. I mean, anyone here care to bring us up to like what's happening?
I died. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know. I'm cataton.
You're good, actually. No, actually, Jordan saved you. You're good.
Yay!
I
We're
think that
best friends now.
I think the biggest thing is what he takes these shroud hounds from Hikari and Tibet, this calling, puts them on himself. He now has two callings riding the backs of, or two shroud hounds riding the backs of his callings, and it's sucking them and him dry. And he's
Aw.
trying whatever he can to get rid of these beasts to no avail. He tries to like pierce through this hagstone, basically this hole in a rock. Can't do anything to the shrouds other than irritate them. They're not dying. And it's like as time goes on, it is sapping his energy and his calling's energy. And at the end of this, he collapses.
Oh,
I know.
thanks, bestie.
That's what I'm here for you, Hikari. 'Cause I love you.
All right.
Pretty good
Now
job.
we go over
there.
to Botan, and which is a random character, not someone that shows up later. But if you do pay attention, which you'll hear that Botan is technically the first person to die. So we don't see this. It's like an off-screen death. But Botan, over to you.
I was so excited for Nikki.
No, I refuse to die. No, I'm just kidding. I thought we were going to show Evan's art.
Let's do yours, and then we'll come back to Evan's art.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
That's their way of saying they don't like it.
No, that's not.
All right.
Drum roll. Anticipation. That's what we're going for.
Chapter 6, Logjam. Botan Watanabe, a short, black-haired woman with a small weasel totem, pulled the lever that brought her tram to a stop. Up ahead, something was blocking the gravity railway. Several somethings. Her boss would not be pleased if the latest shipment of timber in Lucidus is behind schedule. With a pep in her step, she skipped down off the conductor's car to inspect the obstruction. A giant and his beast slept in the middle of the tracks. Or was he dead? Only one way to find out. Because of the steep incline leading from the Skade Range down to the towns along the Lauren River, continuous braking caused the wheels of the timber tram to overheat and warp. This time of year, Botan kept a container of block ice and a number of buckets to cool the wheels with icy water whenever necessary. The conductor dipped a bucket into the freshly melted, still freezing water. She carried it over to where the giant lay. The first bucket did little more than prove he wasn't dead. The flame-haired fellow groaned in distress, but did not rise. Botan directed the second bucket at the shaggy cowdog calling who laid adjacent. The moment the waters struck the calling, a burst of horrific orange sludge assaulted her nostrils. The third, fourth, and fifth buckets were equal efforts to move the giant and his beast, as they were attempts to clean the nastiness off of her railway. Finally, the ninth bucket did the trick. The giant opened his tearful eyes, picked himself up, and stumbled hurriedly down the mountain.
Nice.
Amazing job. So fun. I don't know why. I love Botan.
This was added for anyone that wants to behind the scenes of Behind the Shroud. This was added after your original pass through. So when I read, I didn't get this chapter. So I never read this chapter. It's my first time reading it. And I'm like, oh, this is how this guy finds out of some type of weakness. Because clearly whatever Botan does summons this giant up to like be fine again and not be dead. So if you're watching and you think you know what it is, keep it to yourself. Anything you want to add here, Matt? I guess my question for you as an author, and then we'll bring in Evan's art. Why did you decide to go back and add this chapter?
There's actually 3 chapters. The last 3 chapters that we read were chapters that I added after the fact. my editor, and I welcome this is why I hire an editor, said, I'm just not really feeling like I care about these characters at all. You know, like just two guys doing their thing out in the middle of Estonia. Like honestly, and she had edited Harbinger, the origin story, and had said, "Oh, this is like totally a story that I could see myself as a girl reading and like loving fantasy. I just love the characters; they're so in depth." And so I knew she kind of had this this example that I was trying to duplicate, and I valued that praise the first time around. So like, what can be done to take this guy who is kind of amorphous and give him a shape that you really care about? And show him doing something that's like very human and really reveals his heart. So that's what Joran's chapters were intended to do. It's just like, who is this guy? Not just a weird jester, but let's ground him in a little bit of humanity. And then Botan's chapter was, I think, more a plot device than anything. And I just like the scene. I feel like I can really visualize this giant sleeping on some railroad tracks and the tram coming down and Botan being like, what's this thing in my way? Let me splash some water all over him to get him off my tracks. I got a schedule to keep. And having it be like subtly, something that drives the plot forward.
I think it did such a good job adding to the story and to the character, man. We could probably do an entire video on the importance of having an editor and being okay with someone poking at your work. But for time, let's pass it over to Evan's art in intermission and let him know our thoughts about it. Yeah? Sound good? What we like and what we don't like. Evan. So we're in Behind the Shroud, a mystery novel, and we're doing a quick change here, and we're talking about a children's book that we're working on. Now, fun fact for anyone that likes the lore of Unfound Adventures and Bestunia, this children's book is actually in a similar place within the timeline of Bestunia where Joran and Pendelv are. And if you're like, oh, do they ever cross paths? You will have to read our children's books to find out. But we are talking about a different type of like content that we have here. Evan, let us know a little bit about this children's book and then what you're working on here.
Okay, so it is centered on two main characters, Beck and Keith. Keith and Beck and their callings, and their adventures through Bestunia. And they're easiest to conceive of as like Viking children. Their tribe that they belong to is very Viking-like. And in this book, they're traveling the seas with their parents, with their tribe, with their families, and they end up on a new island. And they decide to go exploring in the middle of the night, unbeknownst to any of the adults, because they see a light up on like the mountainside. And Keith the Curious is, as his namesake suggests, very curious, and Beck the Brave is very brave. So they, dive straight in, and along the way they encounter a lot of things that terrify them, and their, bold new adventure takes a turn for the scary and the uncomfortable. And finally they find the light that they were following to begin with, and it turns out to be Luca the Lightseer and his calling, who actually generates light in this way. He glows. And so the story sort of pivots from there and becomes something different, a story about new friends and shining a light on things that scare us and things that surprise us and things that might otherwise prevent us from pursuing new things, putting ourselves out there, and how often things are a lot less scary than we actually think they are at first. So that's really the goal of this. What we're seeing here is hopefully fairly clear. We've got Beck and Keith and their callings running frantically away from this backlit Luca and his calling right there, just as sort of a cover image. That's the idea here.
I love this. And it's something that, being scared of the unknown and then realizing it's not that big of a thing when light is shined on it. It's something that no one can relate with. It's the very tough thing Unfortunately, this is only for toddlers and babies. If only it could be for others. That being said, man, incredible job summarizing this. It always shocks me because if you're listening, Evan is very like calm, cool, collected, like very logical, very analytical. And there's times I'm like, he's incredible at what he does. How much does he know of our world, or is he just a mastermind at drawing? So when you're able to friggin' recap all this, man, it means so much that it's like you're able to really take the weight of this world and this story and throw it on these pictures. I totally see the picture. I can see my kid even in this first draft of Keith in the front here. I'm super excited for this to come out. Matt, is there anything you want to add to it?
Someone asked him if he wanted to take a nap or go to bed. He's like, no. People don't realize how difficult it is to draw a scene that's happening in the dark and still have it make sense. And so I got to give props where props are due. Evan, like, you're just so good.
Thank you.
One question I have on it, Evan, is like, do you already have an idea of what these shadow figures are going to look like in the light when you draw them in the dark, if that makes sense?
I mean, I certainly know what Beck and Keith look like, and we figured out what Luca is going to look like. Yeah. So you're asking
more of what they end up encountering, because what we're going to see is them encountering these shadowy, like scary things. Do you just draw them in the dark first and then figure out what it would look like with light on it later?
A little bit of both.
Oh,
yeah, a little bit of both. It depends on the idea that sparks, that image or that exploration. So if I want them to feel like they're encountering, a big tentacled creature in the dark, I might start with the tentacles and try to work backwards. Otherwise, I might be like, how can I make an interesting array of hagstones feel like something intimidating and imposing in the dark? Use that negative space, those holes, and make it feel like eyes in the moonlight. I don't know.
Yeah, it's cool. It's like you're using with what you know, and then kind of saying, how could I make this look scary if it was in the dark? Like, we're talking about hagstones literally in these chapters of Behind the Shroud, and we're bringing it up in these books. So I love the way that you just interweave everything we do here. I'm going to no longer put the pressure on you. This is incredible. Real quick, everyone come off mute. Let's give this. Wow. Evan loves praise, by the way. So if you are watching this and you want to give him praise, just tell him how much you love his work. He loves you. Such
incredible.
Good job, Evan.
You're amazing.
Really great. We love it.
We love you.
While the rest of us, so myself and Dylan, are actual people, Pendelv and Jordan in the world of Estunia, the way that Evan, probably for, like, if you had not dragged your feet on creating your beast and like Estunifying yourself, Evan, we wouldn't have done this to you. But you dragged your feet, so we made Evan a volcano called Mount Cancratch, which Dylan, can you actually bring my screen up?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, 1 second. Pendelv the parser screen. Yeah, it's coming up like this.
Oh, really? Okay, let me see what I got to do.
If we're looking for a definition of Cancratch, or are you looking for the picture?
No, I'm bringing up the map. Try it now.
Okay, while you bring up the map, I'm going to tell everyone Cancratch. Man, what is that? Cancratch is an old English-Irish term that means grumpy or disagreeable. And what is he personified as, Matt?
So here he is, over here, Mount Cancratch.
It's a volcano.
There it is. This is the map where this story Behind the Shroud takes place. Also, the first page of Adventures of Beck and Keith starts out long ago in Estunia. There was a village called Home on the edge of the Infant Sea. If we look over here, we see where Home is. But our story, like, right so far, we've spent a lot of time right here around Mount Cancratch. This is where, like, probably somewhere around here is Daisuke and Hikari's Inn. The funicular railway that Botan operates is running through here. But now we're going to jump our story over to Lucidus, where most of the murders have taken place. The murders have taken place over here. So
there has been another murder. And if anyone's like, Lucidus, I can't see that much in this. It is you're kind of looking towards the west, right? So you can kind of see Satvana Plains and Lauren River. It's right in between there. So we're going to jump back into the story. And if you're listening, feel free to drop in the chat last time you used funicular in any sentence you've ever had in your life. That being said, Matt, where are we now in
Jumping into chapter 7, The Beacon of Order, narrated by the Beacon of Order herself, Saw Sorrento. This chapter has Saw, Candor, Pendelv, through us.
Good to go?
over to Saw?
All right, Chapter 7, Beacon of Order. Chaos kept an agenda. Order tried to keep up. That was what Saul thought as she woke suddenly in the middle of the night. She fell out of a busy dream and into a busier consciousness. The Azigara alarm sounded. Gariel, her calling, nosed at her blankets. Downstairs, something pounded a panicked, frantic rhythm into her front door. She took a breath and dragged herself to her feet. Nothing in her 35 years of life had left her as bedraggled as this case. She pulled her black hair into a ponytail, rubbed the furrow from her scowling brow, and stood. The threaded, knotted muscles in her neck, shoulders, and legs ached, but she could do nothing about that now. Am I losing my edge? A minute ago she had been fast asleep, yet none of these disruptions had just began. The Beacon of Order did not have the luxury of sleeping through chaos. Her hypervigilance earned her this position, and remained a requirement. Her appointment to Beacon did not come with a reduction in responsibility. Yes, having a staff of emblems, crests, and drudges did have its perks, but Saul still liked to sink her teeth into her work. She was good at it. The best. In her induction, she had promised the Eldweiser Order, if she relaxed her oversight, allowed her tender-footed underlings a modicum of sovereignty, the fallout belonged on her shoulders. In time. That is what she kept telling herself. Eventually, they would rise to her exacting standards. Though she had bestowed her share of emblems upon crests through the years, few had proved themselves truly worthy of the honor. Until one did, or until the day she became willing to break a promise. Late nights and early mornings would continue, for Saul sleeps with 3 eyes open Sorrento. Ahead awaited another long day filled with community forums, pleas for retribution from grieving families, hysterical locals, pressure from her staff, petitions for her removal orchestrated by her peers, evaporating loyalty from the magnates, and impending betrayal by once steadfast emblems. Not to mention whatever unwelcome development awaited behind her front door. It wouldn't be good news. How could it? This case had become a lap full of snakes. Her days as the Beacon of Order were coming to a close, without any upward prospects. There was not a place for her within the esteem of the Pandit family in Failure's shadow. She needed an arrest, and soon. Not a single precious thing came to mind that she would not trade away for good news. A compact man, heavily muscled, with slick black blonde hair, a thick mustache, and a few days of stubble, still had his fist raised when he flung open her front door. Emblem Candor. He stood before her with all of his militant gusto, ears red with anger, mustachioed lip quivering, and his small teeth bared like a snarling animal. His dew-lapped Pangolian beast, Nipper, perched on his shoulder, showing his many teeth. What type? She asked him, meaning the Azigra. The implication was plain. The Azigra alarm blared. The sound came from the watchtower on the end of her estate, just beyond the gardens. The calling who made the noise, Caton, did so using a special organ on either side of its thorax called a timble. Its tymbals consisted of a series of rubbery ribs that buckled when the beast flexed. Each time a rib buckled, it produced a click. Caton could vibrate its tymbals over 400 times per second, which created a continuous buzzing. When amplified by the beast's hollow body, the alarm could be heard clear across town. By all rights, it should not have been possible to sleep through, unless one's resting state was closer to exhaustion-induced unconsciousness. 10 murders could do that to a woman. 10 murders would do that to a woman. Add several overnight stakeouts, a panicked town, and the vitriol over the curfew from traders, merchants, chandlers, and the wharfinger, the pressure to uphold her promise of order to the Eldweiser, and the frustration of being in possession of no concrete evidence, and now in Azigra? The only thing darker than the circles beneath her emerald eyes was her outlook on her own future.
Actually, Beacon, it's not an Azigra. It's a calling. I laid eyes on it. And I know whose it is. Seeking your permission to take Jorn the Jester into custody.
Beacon Sorrento frowned. She knew Joran well, or she used to. They had been crest together before the Eldweiser promoted her and dismissed him. Once a relatively serious man, his dismissal amplified his quirks. He coped by abandoning the formal emblem uniform, adopting a patchwork motley, wearing a hat made from mushrooms, and always carrying a handful of rocks. The last time she laid eyes on him, he was descending from the sky, using his calling's billowing head like a parachute. He was juggling in midair, and continued to juggle even after he'd dropped all of his rocks. Publicly, Joran's sightings were on the rise. In the last 4 weeks, multiple eyewitnesses reported his name in association with the poisonings. Everywhere the vile orange toxin appeared, there was Joran or one of his 3 callings. While his path diverged from being an emblem for the Eldweiser, Saul could not believe how far he had fallen. When his name first appeared on the short list of suspects, she doubted, albeit the evidence stacked against him had become damning. After miners spotted him in the mountains collecting a suspicious substance, several timbermen identified him running from Baton Wanabe, the tram conductor and first victim. Many others named him in the forums, corroborating stories of his presence accompanied by the same noxious aroma that clung to the deceased. He's finally snapped. And now his name appeared again. Explain, she demanded.
It was the Shaggy one. Stampeded into town. Started by leveling the postman's rookery. You know those stones it throws around? They're like battering rams, but a set of them at his beck and call. Half of the east quarter was in rubble before I arrived on the scene. Not many of us could do with those bludgeons in orbit. It stomped its way into the plaza, took out the gallows, the courthouse, the marketplace, the wharfinger's office, and the boathouse. At long last, it wore itself out in the water. The mass of that fuming beast makes swimming an impossibility. So it didn't. Thing walked under the water, then reappeared on the south shore, heading upriver. Then it was gone.
Gone how? Gone as in ascended? Saul asked.
This wasn't an ascension beacon. The beast was using its mastery.
Saul understood. When a human dies, their calling continues for a brief period called ascension. It served as an opportunity for man and beast to undertake a last order of business. The most common ascensions were beasts mindlessly releasing pent-up energy back into the environment. Less common, available to more advanced souls, was a final will. That might include sending one's totem to a meaningful location or attempting to deliver a message. As one occupational hazard, Saul had witnessed her fair share. Over her tenure, it was well documented that a beast without a living human could not use its mastery. At the end of Candor's explanation, a blond man with inspecting blue eyes walked calmly around the corner.
I think the threat is abated.
He said, covering his ears.
Might be easier to listen in if you call off the alarm.
What kind of lost soul are you, vagrant?
Emblem Candor snarled, leaping to attention. His plated calling matched his hostility, puffing out its vibrant orange dewlap, emitting a throaty growl. The scales down the center of its long, low body stood on end, making themselves appear as sharp. The vertical slits of its eyes bloomed, sucking in light, ready for a fight.
Whose spell are you under?
He cursed, using the expression of the region to accuse one of being out of their right mind. Meanwhile, Gariel stood idly by. The beacon's beast knew what Saul knew. This man meant no harm. This was Pendel the Parser, the legendary detective. Before Nipper tried to bite his head off, Saul officially made the introduction.
Beacon Sorrento.
The man greeted. He clasped his hands in front of his chin, and then nodded once.
Pleasure. Emblem Candor. I know all about you.
Candor creased his thin lips into a half smile. His eyes remained affixed in suspicion, as did the demeanor of his calling. The growl continued just above the range of audibility, a note of warning, an invitation to provoke the beast into a demonstration of its full power.
Should I know you?
Asked the pugnacious emblem. His beast lifted a taloned foot, poising it to strike. Pendelf shrugged.
Your beast reminds me of one of mine.
He said, taking notice.
Only small, a juvenile.
He said matter-of-factly.
I hope you don't intend to use it against that mad dog.
I'll use my...
Candor, the beacon interrupted. I've invited Pendelv here to help us put an end to this unsavory business. The emblem grunted unhappily.
From my perspective, you're a day late and a whit short, Mr. Parser.
Candor said with no less animosity.
Ah, and you've been here the whole time. A new perspective is why I'm here, Emblem. Parsers get called in to stop the bad from happening and make the good guys look good in the process. Are we on the same side?
That mad dog was Adder, so I'm told, said Beacon Saul. Belongs to a man named... Pendelv cut her off.
Joran the Jester.
You know of him, Saul said, surprised to hear the name come from the detective's mouth.
I overheard you speaking about him before.
You were eavesdropping on a private conversation? Past curfew?
Candor accused.
You're steady dancing over the line. You got a death wish?
Pendelv flicked his eyes towards Candor, but did not react.
I have ears in many places.
Sorry.
He
I
said
lost
simply.
I lost my place really bad.
I have ears in many places. Do you understand the nature of my profession? For the sake of expediency, let's assume I know everything you do about tonight. Sounds to me like you have your man.
That's right.
Emblem Candor agreed.
I'm not so sure.
Pendelv countered. Candor looked aghast.
Some parser you are. Tonight marks the fourth witness account implicating the jester. He's been seen with 3 of the victims.
Candor turned up his nose.
I saw Ada with my own 2 eyes. What remains for your doubts to cling to? If you want the facts, just listen. I'll spell them out.
The parser nodded.
All in good time, Emblem.
Calmly, he turned away from the exuberant emblem to the woman who had requested his assistance.
Beacon, I would like to speak to you privately. Can we do that?
We can. Saul turned to her most spirited emblem. Candor, the alarm? The young emblem chewed his lip, torn between being in service to his superior and being left out of the proceedings. Still, he did what she instructed. He gathered himself up into a tight wad of muscle before charging across the grounds towards Caden. The remaining pair and Gariel began a slow stroll across the beacon's estate, toward town. Saul did not comment on the absence of the parser's callings. Based on his previous comments, one of them was close by. She resisted the urge to look around, not wanting to betray her inner thoughts. Besides, she had requested his services, and she ought to trust his methods, though slightly disconcerted about the notion of him and his 3 beasts examining 4 locations at once. The thought alone overwhelmed her tired mind. She had to remember that he was under her employ. No matter how hard she tried, double and triple beastborns made her feel ill-equipped, underdressed, inadequate, rejected, blind, something. And now 2 triple beastborns were in her town. It was a scenario she never thought to dread. The buzzing alarm silenced. Pendelv said,
This Joran, he has multiple beasts.
It wasn't a question. Saul nodded. 3.
Yeah, it's uncommon for a triple beastborn to wreak havoc. It's just not in our nature. With 1 beast, a person may be inclined to force his or her will to be done. With 2, you tend to fall in closer alignment with the deity. You see that your effort against natural law is like trying to fight against the Lawrence current. With 3, you're part of the flow. Going against it will muddle your mind. Slowness becomes the way. With 3, you have been given the answer for every necessity. You have no use for hurry nor fret. You only need to understand a situation and to be what it requires.
You're saying if you're Joran, a destructive rampage would go against your nature?
I'm saying that things may not be what they seem.
Pendelv added. With all due respect, you do not know the jester, Beacon Sorrento said flatly, nor do you grasp the effects of this poison. The man has clearly been exposed to it, and it's damaged his mind. You witnessed the fallout of his madness. While I'm sure your deific sage theory pleases you, I save such reverence for the Eldwisers.
I was a witness, yes.
Pendelv agreed while massaging his blonde beard into a point.
Nearly a victim, too. I watched as Adder turned a patch of clean river into orange sludge, and then the beast, to quote Candor, walked under the water to reappear on the south shore heading upriver. What pacified the beast? The cleansing Lauren? A task seen through? The shock of cold snowmelt? Do you have these answers, Beacon?
No, Saw admitted. But we do have witness accounts placing Joram with the poison and a victim.
They are clearly entangled, yet...
Saw cut the parser off. I have more than enough to warrant an arrest. Much more. I have enough to warrant execution. At this stage, this is what I intend. A public display, the perpetrator caught and justice served. A show of force for the people of Lucidus. That is what the town needs right now.
And should the poisoning continue post-haste?
I have more than one rope, Saul said coldly. Pendelv coughed.
Surely.
Gathering himself, he added,
I hear you're down to gallows. Suppose you'll make do with a tree.
Precisely, the beacon said.
You do what you think is best. I won't interfere.
Pendelv assured her.
I have come all this way to parse out the root of these poisonings. I've put my mind to it. At present, I find Jorn to be an unsatisfying answer to this puzzle. A perceptive citizen may discern from my presence that your expedient justice is not the end of this. Then again, so would another poisoning.
We all have our part to play, Saul said.
I'm glad we understand each other.
Just then, Candor returned with his calling, looking at the edge of his patience. His sneers spoke of an itch for retribution. Beacon Sorrento gave him an assuring look, a nod that he would soon get what he most craved. To Pendelv, is there something else? The parser shook his head.
Let's get to work.
Oh, I had chills in a couple parts of that. That was good.
Yeah, they're awesome. Like, whoa.
Very, very good. Kind of. So my quick recap of this for anyone watching, Matt, I say we probably stop with this chapter.
Sure.
Today,
That's
right?
fine.
Like we're at the top. It is Valentine's Day. I would do it. I call them side quests with Keith now when I do like tasks like going to Kroger and we're gonna go get some flowers for the lady. But we'll stop there because the next one's literally just Joran talking anyway. My recap of this is like we're seeing this beacon of order for anyone that's been following, who's kind of like the sheriff in these parts, and she's been given that from this person called an Eldwiser. How would you describe that, Matt? An Eldwiser in this world?
Yeah, like the sage, a Dalai Lama, someone that possesses so much like spiritual insight. Just like being around this person is so enlightening that they command authority, not by like the iron fist, but just by their sheer wisdom.
And like then right under them we have these beacons, right? Beacon of order, obviously like the town sheriff, and then we're starting to see this hierarchy of like there's Eldwiser, there's this Pandit family, and then there's a beacon of order. We hear about these crests, which is what Candor is, and the main thing that I'm getting
beacon, emblem, crest, drudge, and then there's a bunch of other beacons too. I don't think we've heard about any others yet, but you'll hear about a beacon of infrastructure. You'll hear about a beacon of history. It's like people that are kind of at the top of some study. Beacon Saw Sorrento is that of order. Go on.
And Candor is an emblem, not a crest.
Right.
The main thing that we're seeing though with this beacon of order is literally how much pressure she has on her shoulders. Like sleeps with three eyes open, never stops. She's waking up to these alarms going off, thinking it's another Azigra attack. So like she's under a lot of pressure, right? So my quick question for Saw is, do you tap into anything to be this person that's like, I have a bunch of pressure on me before you start speaking, or you just start speaking?
I just think about the pressures that the character would have on her at the time. She's stressed, she's a little wigged out, she's got a chip on her shoulder, and it feels like the whole world on her shoulder at the moment. Everything in her general area has gone to put. So
she's got like pressure from the top, right? She's like this pressure she's thinking of, as well as pressure from the bottom, where we have like this emblem Candor coming up that just wants to attack.
That wants to like actually get rid of her, if at all possible, just by the tone of voice he uses.
I mean, so Candor, how do you tap into someone like this? Because real quick, Kurt, can you just talk normal? Like just like Kurt?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what he sounds like. Clearly not Candor. And then he gets this beautiful Jason Statham. What do you do to put yourself in that mode when you think of Candor?
I don't know. I think of like an old Western sheriff, who's just he's at his wit's end. There's been lots of murders, and he's ready to take them down.
Dude, it was so funny to watch Hikari, like your face, Kirsten, I'm sorry, your face as soon as Candor started talking, because we've seen it before. So she's getting it for the first time, and I'm like, yep, there it is. That's someone here in Candor.
It was so amazing.
So,
both of them, like their synergy, I was like blown away. I was having fun listening to them. I was like, yeah.
So
yeah, you've gotten better every time. And I think that as you digest the material, now for Katie, I feel like first read, like even when you were sending me clips early on, like, what do you think about this? And first of all, I was like, first take, yes, okay. I know we already casted you, but you were just that much more locked in. And I think your grasp of the material has brought out an element of the character that's even more what I intended. It's my words, so I know kind of how that's supposed to flow and how it's supposed to feel, and you've nailed that. And Kurt, for you've brought an element to this character that I couldn't really even foresee. In fact, like you doing the voice shaped the edits, and so I just emphasized more and more and more of this character that is exactly what you bring to it in that voice. So it's a funny way to be able to do that, is to hear the voice through one of your friends, like evolving the character and then step into that influence. It's cool.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's been fun to kind of mess around. I really like the table reads where we're kind of playing off each other.
Yeah, it's like you can kind of like, I'm like, ooh, he says this. Ooh, they're like clearly going back and forth, right? Like you see Candor come in, you see Pendelv and him kind of like this wiener measuring contest. I can't say the bad word. Is that still bad if I say wiener? Anyway, it's like this measuring contest they have between. Yeah, they're beast
measuring contest.
beast measuring contest. We hear that Saw kind of goes back with Joran. They were crests back in the day, so we see this like connection this beacon of order has with this madman. I kid you, I'm doing my best. But I mean, the biggest thing that I wanted to say with all this is like, Matt, couple of things here. Huge kudos to you. One, to like not only put out, it's so hard to put out a written word, right? Especially to do it as beautifully as you do it. And then on top of that, being able to be adaptable enough when this idiot, pointing at myself, turns a character into his own, right? When Candor turns a character into his own, when Saw starts adding this to be like, oh, I can adapt. Like there's not a lot of people that can adapt to that. So huge kudos to you. And then the things that I loved in this chapter is the world building that you do through these callings. Like actually hearing about, I think Tayton, or what was it, Caton?
Yeah.
Hearing about this calling that has these timbrels that rattle and sound this alarm and this hollow body. I'm like, oh, this is the magic of this world through these callings. Yeah. And last one, sorry, I know you're going to say something. Like trying not to swear for these kids. That's hard for me. So you bring in things like, what kind of lost soul are you? I remember you asking me like, what would someone say if they basically wanted to say and then expletive. What kind of lost soul are you? Whose spell are you under? Candor, you did a great job with it, man. So just huge kudos to you, man, to build this world.
Really fun. Actually, so I worked on Harbinger, the origin story, for like a year and a half. Finally got it to the end back in like June. And so all through June, July, as I was writing the story, the cicadas were just like so loud. every night these cicadas would go off. And I'm like, man, this really sounds like an alarm. If you were to magnify this by 20, and then just imagine this creature that would make this sound at that volume, or it could be an alarm. This makes a lot of sense for this world, like high volume cicadas. And so funny enough, like that, looking up how does a cicada make the noise that it makes, you'll discover they have timbals, they vibrate these things, they buckle, they snap at like, I don't know how many times per second, 50, 100, several hundred. And so that's always a fun thing with building this world is there's not technology. They're not going to have like an electronic tornado alarm over there if an Azigger comes to town. There's probably going to be some beast that can make some loud noise. So you find these opportunities to build stuff like that. Same with like, how do you make music? How do you make, what's a fairy look like? You know, there's usually a calling that's an answer to that in a very collaborative world like Bastunia is.
And we'll bring in Evan and his mastery here. But I think what you're talking about, like, in my opinion, like, is what we really want to show with Bastunia is, I think, if we think of our wibbly wobbly earth, as Matt would say, and especially in capitalist America, we have grown so comfortable with like normalizing success being specific things. How much money do you make? How much accomplishments have you had? How much fame do you have?
How much can you go without relying on everybody else because you have the resources?
And I think with this, it's like something as simple. See how easy it is to say, is like making an alarm and letting other people know about something big is literally somebody's calling in this world. Like making music and how their calling it's their calling in this world, right? Like I feel like it, hopefully when people find themselves through Bastunia, they're like, oh yeah, this thing that the world says is small is my calling. Like this is the paintbrush I have to paint on this canvas of earth while I'm here. Hopefully that resonates. It might be me just being too big of a hippie, but I love what you've done with the world. I love what each of us are adding to it. And we're going to leave it there. We have these people are on the hunt. Saw has enough nooses for a bunch of people to hang, and she's ready. And clearly Candor is ready too. That psychopath. Pendelv, not so sure. Joran, still an idiot. And we're going to see as this huge, angry mob, first angry mob, comes at Joran. What is Joran thinking in during this time? He will be reciting a poem or a song next week. We will be going through the next couple of chapters here. You're going to see Candor again. You're going to see Saw again. You're going to see Joran and Pendelv again. Matt, anybody else in the next couple of chapters? You're muted.
I think that we got just Joran in the next one, then Pendelv, Saw, and Candor's back. There's a small role, a character named Newt. If you have anybody that you think would be fun to do a couple of lines, you want to invite them. We're casting for a Newt, Pendelv, and Joran. We've kind of got a series of chapters upcoming with where it's just Pendelv and Joran going back and forth, becoming friends, maybe.
Hey Matt, I might have somebody for Newt. Can you explain a little bit about who that character is?
Yeah, Newt is a fellow emblem. I think a little bit more, probably truly like a friend of Candor, come up through what you call drudgery, became crest together, eventually became emblems. Not so much as a partner, because Candor doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would take a partner, but a fellow, member of the force.
Candor's a lone ranger. Get off my horse.
I was going to say, could anyone be your friend, do you think?
Yeah.
If so, find that person. Yeah, we'll bring them. Clearly, I am 0 for 1 trying to bring someone to this, Matt. Thanks for being Dice K today. No one is looking at your arm because you're a very small box and all this. Just a heads up. We're going to finish it with just, first off, happy Valentine's Day to everybody. Evan, can you kind of zoom out slightly?
Yeah.
now you're seeing Evan show Keith and Beckett. I love that. Like at first you kind of see that draft, and now we're actually getting the detail with it as Beck and Keith run away from this mysterious person that turns out to be the hero of book 2 of Beck and Keith. Evan, I guess the last question I have is this just kind of part of the process? Like, you know what these guys look like in the back of your mind. Let's
Yeah.
kind of just show this.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I do know these characters really well. We've worked on them for a while now. If I didn't, there would absolutely be a step between this and this, or at least one. But yeah, I know them, and I'm pretty confident in these poses and character staging. So I just kind of went ahead and like I'm drawing in Beck's face without a whole lot of visual information to go on for the rest of his body, but like it's shorthand for me, and I'm confident in that shorthand at the moment. So sometimes I'm not, and I need to
So good,
to
man.
explore that rough draft a little bit more, but
Again,
sometimes it just works out.
the weekly reminder, we appreciate your genius and your mastery so much. If Evan had a calling, it would be one that could just paint amazing things due to a bunch of practice. Don't worry, I'll make sure to say that. But dude, this is clearly a mastery. We absolutely love it and appreciate you. And if you are still here, you're watching it live or the replay, and you're like, I would love to pick up some of these books. Check out our website. You can get our children's book. You can get behind the shroud so you can read along with us. If you would like to go back and watch our other videos where we do table reads, make sure you go to our public Facebook page. We're also on Twitch. We're also on YouTube. Check us out. Make sure you like and subscribe. That's how we get this message out there. Yes, I have to do this small pitch. You can also get our comics on our website. You can create your own calling. You can ask yourself, man, what would my calling look like? There is a worksheet that you will do. You can create it yourself, and then we pass over your information to our illustration team, and they will turn your calling to life in Bastunia. Feel free to look at any of that stuff. So far, so well said.
Yep. Excellent.
Did you just,
what's the website?
Oh, the website. I thought you said, I thought you interrupted me to say well said, which is like kind of, website is unfoundadventures.com. No need for www. That messes it up. Unfoundadventures.com. We have a weekly blog in there. We have a bunch of pictures from young kids creating their calling and what we've turned it into. You can sponsor a young kid's calling to come to life if you really like what we're doing. We cannot build this without the community that we have. So we thank our community so much. I say we all the time. I'm not talking about Evan, Matt, and I. I'm talking about every person you see here on the screen, every person watching this, and every person in our community. I think it is so cool to build something together. And on that super cliche outro that Evan will make fun of me for later, we will let you all go. I hope you have an incredible weekend. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Yes, we got to buy from
Thank
Evan.
you.
We got to buy from Evan. Yay.
Shout out to our friends.
Shout out to your friends.